Good morning, everyone. Allow me to discuss it with you with our given topic, the self as a cognitive construct. But first, let me introduce to you my co-reporters, Jen Vincent Bolalacao, Mian Bustarga, Gillier Cabarogias, Rica Micasero, and yours truly, Kimberly Dacara. The self as a cognitive construct. William James and the me-self and I-self. William James is an American philosopher and psychologist, leader of the philosophical movement of pragmatism and of the psychological movement of functionalism. Philosopher and psychologist William James was one of the first to postulate a theory of the self, and William James described the two aspects of the self that he termed the I-self and me-self. Me-self, it is empirical me. It is a separate object or an individual person refers to when describing personal experiences. It includes material self, social self, and spiritual self. While the I-self, it is the pure ego. It is the self that knows who they are and what they have done in their life. When we say me-self, it is the empirical me means verifiable by observation or experience. The me-self is a more subjective and phenomenon referring to the individual's reflection about themselves. And we come now to this. William James distinguished three components of the me-self, where it is the material self, social self, and spiritual self. Material self, things that belong to a person or entities that a person belongs to. The core of the material self is the body. Make up the material self includes body, family, clothes, and money. When we say material self, it is the tangible objects or possessions we collect for ourselves. The second one is the social self. It is who we are in a given social situation, and people change how they act depending on the social situation that they are in. When we say the social self, it is how we interact and portray ourselves within different groups, situations, or persons. The third one is the spiritual self. It is who we are at our core. It is more concrete and permanent than the other two selves. The spiritual self is our subjective and the most intimate self. It is aspects of an individual's spiritual self include personality, core values, and conscience that do not typically change during their lifetime. When we say naman na the spiritual self, it is the internal dispositions, which is our personal factors such as traits, abilities, and feelings. So we come now to I-self, which is the pure ego. The pure ego is what provides the thread of continuity between our past, present, and future selves. It is similar to what we think as of the soul or the mind. It was not a substance and therefore could not be examined by science. When we say I-self, whereas the I-self reflects what people see or perceive themselves during in the physical world. It is the part of the self that knows who they are and what have they accomplished in life. It is allowing us to view ourselves to have a consistent and individual identity.
According to Neil, self-concept is an overreaching idea that we have about who we are physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, and in terms of any other aspect that make up who we are. So, when we say self-concept, pinag-uusapan natin dito ang buong pagkatao natin, including the involves our feelings, thinking, experiences. Yan. We form our self-concept as we grow based on the knowledge that we have ourselves. So, nabubuo daw ang pagkatao natin habang tayo lumalaki. Two particularly important structural aspects of self-concept are complexity and clarify. According to Linville, Lucas, and Brewer, self-complexity, the extent to which individuals have many different and relatively independent ways of thinking about themselves. So, when we say self-complexity, pinag-uusapan natin dito ang mga different personalities. Like, for example, pag makikipag-usap ka sa kapatid mo, so makikipag-usap ka as sa kuya, Tapos pag nasa iba ka, alimba sa kaibigan mo, iba ka naman makikipag-usap sa kanya. So, ganyan lang. According to Campbell, self-clarity, the extent to which one's self-concept clearly and constantly defined. So, dito pinag-uusapan natin dito ang pagiging consistent mo sa personalidad mo. Like, one personality lang ang pinapakita mo sa ibang tao.
Real and ideal self-concepts. So Carl Rogers is a humanistic psychologist who agreed with the main assumptions of Abraham Maslow. And Carl Rogers added that for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with genuineness, which is openness and self-disclosure, acceptance, being seen with unconditional positive regard, and empathy, being listened to and understood. So without this, relationships and healthy personalities will not develop as they should, much like a tree will not grow without sunlight and water. And Carl Rogers also believed that humans have one basic motive, that is the tendency to self-actualize.
Self-actualization. According to Carl Rogers, the organism has one basic tendency and striving to actualize, maintain, and enhance the experiencing organism. Carl Rogers believed that humans have one basic motive, that is tendency to self-actualize or to fulfill one's potential and achieve the highest level of human beingness we can. Like a flower that will grow to its full potential, if the conditions are right but which is constrained by its environment, so people will flourish and reach their potential if their environment is good enough. However, unlike a flower, the potential of the individual human is unique, and we are meant to develop in different ways according to our personality. Rogers believed that people are inherently good and creative. They become destructive only when a poor self-concept or external constraints override the valuing process. Carl Rogers believed that for a person to achieve self-actualization, they must be in a stage of congruence. This means that self-actualization occurs when a person's ideal self, or who they would like to be, is congruent with their actual behavior or self-image. Ideal self. This is the person who would like to be. This person has attributes or qualities you are either working toward or want to possess. It's who you envision yourself to be if you were exactly as you wanted. It consists of our goals and ambitions in life, and is dynamic or forever changing. The ideal self in childhood is not the ideal self in our teens or late 20s, etc. The ideal self is an idealized version of yourself created out of what you have learned from your life, experiences, the demands of society, and what you admire in your role models. Real self. The real self is who we actually are. It is how we think, how we feel, look, and act. The real self can be seen by others, but because we have no way of truly knowing how others view us, the real self is our self-image. Self-image means how we see ourselves, which is important to good psychological health. Self-image includes the influence of our body image on inner personality. At a simple level, we might perceive ourselves as a good or bad person, beautiful or ugly. Self-image affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in the world. 5 characteristics of the fully functioning person. Rogers believed that every person could achieve their goal. This means that a person is in touch with the here and now. His or her subjective experiences and feelings continually growing and changing. In many ways, Rogers regarded the fully functioning person as an ideal and one that people do not ultimately achieve. It is wrong to think of this as an end or completion of life's journey. Rather, it is a process of always becoming and changing. Rogers identified 5 characteristics of the fully functioning person. The first one is open to experience. Both positive and negative emotions accepted. Negative feelings are not denied but worked through rather than resorting to ego defense mechanisms. The second one is existential living, in touch with different experiences as they occur in life, avoiding prejudging and preconceptions, being able to live and fully appreciate the present, not always looking back to the past or forward to the future, or living for the moment. The third one is trust feelings. Feelings, instincts, and gut reactions are paid attention to and trusted. People's own decisions are the right ones, and we should trust ourselves to make the right choices. The fourth one is creativity. Creative thinking and risk-taking are features of a person's life. A person does not play safe all the time. This involves the ability to adjust and change and seek new experiences. The fifth is fulfilled life. A person is happy and satisfied with life and always looking for new challenges and experiences. Fulfillment is about living a deeply meaningful life, a life of purpose and satisfaction. Fulfillment is not necessarily about happiness. It is about meaning and deep meaning. It's about one's vision, their dreams, and living in full alignment and flow with their values. In a word, fulfillment is about being fully alive.
Rogers' personality theory, the notion of self or self-concept, the organized consistent set of perceptions and beliefs about oneself. Components of self-concept, self-worth, self-image, and ideal self. Self-worth comprises what we think about ourselves. High self-worth has confidence and positive feelings about him herself, faces challenges in life, accepts failure and unhappiness at times, and open with people. Low self-worth may avoid challenges in life, not accept that life can be painful and unhappy at times, and will be defensive and guarded with other people. Unconditional positive regard versus conditional positive regard. People accepts and loves the person for what she is. Consequences, the person feels free to try things out and make mistakes, even though this may lead to getting it worse at times. The person is not loved by who she is, but on condition that she behaves only in ways approved by other people. A person who constantly seeks approval from other people. So let me enlighten you guys what is unconditional positive regards and conditional positive regards. So what is unconditional positive regards? So first is defined by humanistic psychologists to mean expressing empathy, support, and acceptance to someone regardless of what they say or do. Rogers emphasized that the importance of unconditional positive regards in healthy personality development. Conditional positive regards, an attitude of acceptance and esteem that others express an individual on a conditional basis that is depending on the acceptability of the individual's behavior in accordance with the other personal standards. So what is the difference between unconditional and conditional positive regards? Unconditional positive regards does not reward good behavior and make an individual believe that they are only valued if those behaviors are performed as conditional positive regard. Instead, a person is accepted regardless of the actions they have taken in the past. Congruent versus congruent. When a person's ideal self is not consistent with what happens in their life. Congruent, when a person's ideal self is not consistent with what happens in their life. So what is incongruent and congruent? Congruence is the matching of experience and awareness. This means is a fairly accurate match between self-concept and reality. Incongruence has feelings not aligned with actions. It is the between self-concept and reality.
Hello everyone, my name is Maria Maya Nicole Buena Bostariga. So my topic is about multiple versus unified selves. Multiple self. Multiple identity means decentered and multiple of self. Such a decentered subjectivity, contradictory, is not necessarily centered by one self-defining or true identity. Consequently, the multiple identities of a subject both social and personal, are relevant to and engage in the specific social milieu. Since subjects engage different and multiple identities in response to the social context in which they find themselves at a given moment, not one identity is a priori or necessarily more central, self-defining, or true than any other. So the centered is the act of listening to the perspective of people experiencing oppression without centering the conversation on one's personal views when they are in a place of privilege. The notion of multiple personality, or what today is often referred to as dissociative identity disorder, DID, which leads to difficulty. The question before us is which self breaks into different personalities or selves according to Mead. I research about DID. DID is a mental health condition. People with the have two or more separate identities. These personalities control their behavior at different times. Each identity has its own personal history, traits, likes, and dislikes. From Mead's vantage point, it will be to suggest that a self that one has is in one social setting. Further, we will then be left with the possibility of multiple personality disorders if more than one of our social selves fractured, that is, if distinct social monads split in their own domains. Mead's comments on multiple personality at minimum open the door to the possibility that there is a unity to the self that transcends individual generalized others and their social selves, a more comprehensive self that might split, that might become schizoid. Mead said it is normal to have multiple personalities. When we come so across with different people, we have different selves to meet various social reactions. The unity and structure of the complete self reflects the whole social structure, and the elementary selves reflect various aspects of the social structure. Unified self. The self is sometimes understood as a unified being essentially connected to consciousness, awareness, and agency. Unified self means of referring to the composite persona, or the self that contains all of the other personas that exist with a person's interactional style. Agency. The sense of agency, or sense of control, is the subjective awareness of initiating, executing, and controlling one's own volitional action in the world. Agency is the capability of individual to make choices and to act on those choices in ways that make a difference in their lives. Consciousness refers to your individual awareness of your unique thoughts, memories, feelings, sensations, and environments. Consciousness can be defined for an individual as the awareness of his or her own body in a time-space continuum and its interaction with the environment, including others. Ownership. The self is the owner of the body, feelings, thoughts, etc. Ownership and agency work together to help make the self. Ownership describes the feelings or thoughts. Sense of agency refers to the experience of initiating and controlling action.
True versus false selves. Dr. Donald Winnicott. This psychological theory of the true and the false self is the work of one of the 20th century's greatest thinkers, the English psychoanalyst and child psychiatrist Donald Winnicott. So the theory of a true self and false self was advanced by British psychoanalyst Dr. Donald Winnicott in a series of papers in the 1960s. Winnicott contends that everyone is divided into these two selves and that people develop a false self to protect their inner, more vulnerable true self. The true self of the infant, in Winnicott's formulation, is by nature asocial and amoral. It isn't interested in the feelings of others, it isn't socialized. The true self of the child must be granted the imaginative opportunity to destroy the parent when it is in a rage, and then witness the parent surviving and enduring, which lends the child a vital and immensely reassuring sense that it is not in fact omnipotent, and that the world won't collapse simply because it sometimes wishes or fears it could. When things go well gradually and willingly, the child develops a false self, a capacity to behave according to the demands of external reality. Winnicott was not a thorough enemy of a false self. He understood its role well enough. He simply insisted that it belonged to health only when it had been preceded by a thorough earlier experience of an untrammeled true self. The true self refers to a sense of self based on authentic experience and the feeling of being truly present and alive. The false self is a defensive facade behind which the person can feel empty, its behaviors being learned and controlled rather than spontaneous and genuine. The true self is represented by our real feelings and desires. The false self is a side of us that has changed its behavior, repressed feelings, and pushed needs aside in order to survive. Children are very attuned to their parents' feelings and needs. They consciously recognize that they need their parents' approval in order to survive, so strive to meet their needs as much as possible. The true self, the child's real feelings, needs, desires, thoughts, is pushed further and further. Of course, we still have all of these feelings, needs, desires, and thoughts. It's just that we adopted the false self that dominates us. We can be grateful to Winnicott for reminding us that contentment and a feeling of reality have to pass through stages of almost limitless delinquent selfishness. There is simply no other way. We have to be true before we can be usefully a bit fake. And if we have never been allowed, then our sickness and depression is there to remind us that we need to take a step back, and therapy is there to allow us to do so.
The self as proactive and agentic. Proactive self. Being proactive is about taking responsibility for your life. Proactive people recognize that they are responsible. They don't blame genetic, circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. They know they choose their behavior. Reactive people, on the other hand, are often affected by their physical environment. They find external sources to blame for their behavior. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it isn't, it affects their attitude and performance, and they blame the weather.
Agentic self. People as self-organizing, proactive, self-reflective, and self-regulating as time change. An agentic perspective states that we are not merely reactive organisms shaped by environmental forces or driven by inner impulses. Agentic self is defined by self-directed action aimed at personal growth and development based on self-chosen goals, and thus students initiate action of their own volition that drive their learning.
When can we say a person is proactive and agentic? A self with self-awareness and a positive will for themselves, they recognize themselves as responsible. Proactive people focus their efforts on the circle of influence. They work on the things they can do something about, those who make things happen. They are the opposite of reactive people whose attitude depends and get easily affected by their environment. Reactive people focus their efforts on the circle of concern, things over which they have little or no control. Being proactive means taking responsibility for your life and actions rather than just watching how things happen. Being proactive takes time, since you have to consider your options, weigh alternatives, and make your own decisions in order to achieve your goals. A reactive behavior is influenced by the environment and outside forces. Being proactive means anticipating problems, seeking new solutions, and doing your best. People who are proactive are then called agentic. Just like being proactive, they become self-regulating even with the change of time. Making a proactive choice and to manage the way you think and act involves self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to keep disruptive emotions and impulses in check and to think before acting. Being self-regulated means we're able to bounce back from negative feedback, which stops us from wallowing in self-pity.
Thank you for that, Miss Rikami Casero. So I guess that would be all, and I hope everyone learned something about from the topic that we have discussed. Thank you.